When you think of nuns, what comes to mind? Black and white habits, solemn prayer, and strict convent walls. Well, get ready for a surprise. Sacred ones, gather round, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about the life of a nun. I'm not talking about the serene, peaceful image you see in movies or church. I'm talking about a deeper, hidden side of convent life. Secrets that nuns don't want you to know. Imagine a young girl eager to serve God entering a convent. At first, it's like heaven, peace, joy, and devotion. But over time, she notices cracks, whispers in the hallways, hinting at something more. A nun confides in her about loneliness, desires left unspoken, and emotion. Another admits that some nuns sneak out of the convent for a brief taste of freedom. Despite their vows, they battle temptations, hiding their struggles beneath their habits. It's easy to think of nuns as saintly, untouched by the world. But what if I told you that many nuns secretly wrestle with their humanity in ways that might shock you? Behind the veil of piety, they too are humans struggling with desires, fears, and doubts just like the rest of us. If you're ready to uncover the untold truth about nuns' lives, smash that like button, share, and subscribe to dig deeper into their hidden world. Point 1. The struggles of sacrifice. When we think of nuns, many of us envision women who have given up everything for their faith. This idea of sacrifice is deeply rooted in the vows they take, vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. These vows seem like the ultimate act of selflessness. But what is the real cost of such a life? What does it mean to live without material possessions, relationships, or freedom? Let's dive into the experience of Sister Margaret, a nun who entered the convent in her 20s with a heart full of devotion. She was excited to dedicate her life to God and to serve others. However, as the years wore on, the weight of her sacrifices began to settle in. Living without the comforts of family, without the joy of raising children, and without the companionship of a romantic partner, Sister Margaret started to feel the isolation. It's one thing to choose a life of service, but it's another to live it day after day, year after year, without the human connections most people take for granted. Loneliness, especially during the holidays when the world around her celebrated with loved ones, became a silent companion. These moments of solitude, meant for spiritual reflection, sometimes served as painful reminders of what she had given up. The joy of connection, of shared experiences, of holding a loved one's hand. These were things Sister Margaret had renounced for the sake of her vows. Yet despite the ache in her heart, she continued to embrace her calling, pushing those human longings aside. This raises a question. Does sacrifice truly make someone holy, or does it slowly erode their sense of self? Sister Margaret, despite her unwavering love for God, would tell you that there's a human part of her that yearns for connection, for the kind of love that comes without religious obligations. But this part is often hidden away, as nuns are taught to prioritize their commitment to God over all else. In fact, many religious communities promote the idea that spiritual fulfillment comes from detachment from worldly pleasures. Sister Margaret's experience, while unique, reflects a broader truth about sacrifice. It's not as simple as a one-time choice. Over time, the ongoing nature of sacrifice can shape a person's identity, sometimes in ways they hadn't anticipated. In striving for holiness, they might lose pieces of themselves along the way. The question then becomes, can a person remain whole while sacrificing so much? Or do these sacrifices ultimately leave behind echoes of what was lost? Through Sister Margaret's story, we see that sacrifice is not just about giving things up. It's about what it costs the soul and whether that cost is truly worth the gain. Point 2. The emotional turmoil. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. While nuns might outwardly appear serene and devoted, there's often an emotional storm raging beneath the surface. This inner conflict can be profound, as the outward life of prayer, community, and devotion doesn't always align with the quiet struggles they endure privately. Sister Agnes, a nun who spent years in a convent, opened up about the days when she felt overwhelmed by her emotions. She would often question her very calling, wondering if she was truly following God's will or if she was merely escaping from her fears and doubts in the outside world. This internal battle is more common than many realize. It's what some refer to as convent depression, a condition where the emotional isolation and the overwhelming pressure to maintain an appearance of holiness create a disconnect from one's true self. Nuns, like Sister Agnes, find themselves caught in a tug-of-war between their deep spiritual calling and the personal desires, doubts, and emotional struggles they carry. To truly understand this, let's dive deeper. Imagine dedicating your life to God, living in a quiet, secluded environment, and committing to a life of prayer and service, but constantly feeling like something is missing. You have a sense of purpose, yet you struggle to reconcile it with your... For some nuns, this becomes a daily reality. A constant internal conflict where the outer life of devotion masks the inner emotional battle they silently endure. This kind of emotional isolation can lead to what some describe as a dark night of the soul, a period of intense spiritual desolation. It's an internal crisis where the sense of connection with God may seem distant and feelings of loneliness and confusion cloud the heart. The clean, holy exterior, the peaceful habit and devout prayers can hide this storm, leaving nuns to grapple with their faith and emotions in silence. Sacred ones, this story isn't just about the lives of nuns. It's a reminder that sometimes what we see on the outside is just one layer. Under the surface, there can be an emotional war that remains unresolved, even as we try to live our lives in alignment with what we believe to be true. We can all relate to that internal struggle between doing the right thing and still feeling like something's missing. Sometimes it takes more than just faith. It requires true emotional healing and understanding. The Forbidden Temptations, let's take a deep dive into a topic that challenges the traditional perceptions of nuns' temptation. It's no secret that nuns, like all humans, are susceptible to the same desires and challenges. Food, money, power, and yes, even romantic love. Despite their vow of chastity, these feelings can creep up, leading to inner turmoil and conflict. Take Sister Clara, for instance. She once admitted that, at times, she found herself drawn to certain men, those who came to the convent to help with charity work or simply to visit. Though this wasn't something she was proud of, it was a human experience she couldn't ignore. Torn between her vow and her natural feelings, she buried these desires deep inside, convincing herself that her commitment to God was greater than any fleeting attraction. But what if I told you that not all nuns handle these temptations in the same way? In some rare cases, nuns have been known to act on their desires, breaking their sacred vows. There have been secret relationships with priests or even fellow nuns. This reality reveals a hidden side of convent life, one that's rarely discussed but does exist behind closed doors. While these instances are not the norm, they do challenge the idealized image of the vow as an ironclad commitment. The Church itself has kept these stories largely under wraps, preferring to uphold the image of unwavering devotion, but this hidden world of human frailty and temptation is a testament to the complexities of the human spirit, even within those who dedicate their lives to religious service. It shows us that no matter how committed one may be, temptation can still find a way in. Point 4. The hidden world of power and influence beyond the serenage of convent life lies a complex web of power dynamics that often goes unnoticed. While many nuns dedicate their lives to prayer, service, and spiritual growth, the reality within these sacred walls can sometimes mirror the power struggles seen in secular organizations. Sister Isabella, a nun who spent over 30 years in a convent, shared her first-hand experience of the underlying competition for influence within these religious communities. It's easy to assume that life in a convent is purely about harmony and devotion to God. However, as in any institution, there are layers of social dynamics at play. Nuns, despite their spiritual vows, are still human beings with desires for recognition, leadership, and influence. In the hierarchy of convent life, leadership positions, such as abbess or prioress, are highly coveted. These roles come with not only respect but also a greater ability to shape the convent's direction and resources. Sister Isabella recalls witnessing subtle power struggles among her fellow nuns. Some would form alliances, quietly supporting each other to climb the ranks. Others, less transparent in their ambitions, would manipulate situations, using their knowledge of the convent's inner workings to gain favor with higher-ups. These covert actions, while often hidden under the guise of piety, could dramatically affect the convent's decisions and resources. It's important to acknowledge that these power dynamics, though unseen by many, are part of a larger reality. Just like in any organization, sacrifices are often made, and sometimes the quiet ambitions of one led to the downfall of another. In convent life, these struggles occur in the shadows, yet they reveal an essential truth. No system, however sacred, is free from the forces of power and influence. The silence of the Church for centuries, the lives of nuns have been shrouded in a veil of silence, a silence that often masks their deeper struggles. In convents, the prevailing expectation is one of unwavering obedience, self-sacrifice, and unshakable discipline. This culture of silence leaves little room for vulnerability, forcing many nuns to hide their human emotions, desires, and conflicts. Temptation, emotional turmoil, or even doubt is rarely discussed, often deemed a weakness that contradicts their commitment to spiritual life. The idea of suppressing these natural human experiences is deeply ingrained in convent life. Nuns are taught that suffering is a spiritual discipline, a path to holiness, and any emotional distress is to be endured quietly, in isolation. While obedience is highly valued, it often creates an environment where personal struggles are ignored or belittled. The silence surrounding these challenges can lead to a dangerous mental and emotional strain. Without adequate support, nuns can feel isolated, overwhelmed, and misunderstood, especially when they experience feelings of doubt or desire that conflict with their vows. The Church historically has contributed to this silence, often prioritizing outward obedience over the emotional well-being of its members. While devotion and discipline are important, there's a need for a more compassionate approach, one that recognizes the humanity of nuns and provides the support they require to cope with their struggles. Sacred ones, it's time to break this silence. We must recognize that nuns, in their devotion, are still human beings with complex emotions and challenges. Their struggles are no different from those we all face. By acknowledging their humanity and offering empathy, we can foster a more open and compassionate dialogue, allowing them to embrace their full spiritual and emotional selves. So, sacred ones, what do we take away from all this? What's the secret that nuns don't want you to know? It's simply, are humans. They are just like us, with desires, fears, and struggles that are often hidden beneath their robes. Their sacrifices come with costs. Their lives, though devoted to God, are not free from temptation or emotional turmoil. But here's the most important. Sacred ones, what we can learn from their stories is that even in the midst of our struggles, we can find peace. Even in the most difficult of circumstances, we can remain true to our calling, whatever that may be. And remember, it's not about perfection. It's about embracing our humanity, our flaws, and our journey with grace. If this video opened your eyes to the truths you never expected, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to join our community of sacred ones. Apply these lessons to your life and let them guide you towards a more impactful existence. Having said this, remember, sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones within ourselves. But in those battles, we find our strength.